Today I'd like to talk about the powers of Congress as enumerated under the United States Constitution. The powers of Congress are found in Article 1, Section 8, which lists them out. I recommend you go look them up online. There's probably 20 powers that are enumerated given to Congress. I'll give you a little bit of a background before I get into the specifics. The reason Congress was given these powers was because the original national government was organized under something called the Articles of Confederation, which basically left each of the states in a loose military alliance and really nothing else. A weak central government that didn't really have power to enforce anything and didn't have any powers to make that many laws regarding anything but national defense. And even those were feckless under the looseness of the organization. So they decided to form a stronger federal government, which is organized under the Constitution, of course. And what was going on under the Articles of Confederation were each state was enacting protectionist economic measures, either subsidies for their own local crops or products or tariffs on other states selling their products into that state. So, everyone, it's kind of like the prisoner's dilemma where everyone knows that if you work together, it's better for everyone else, but the temptation is always there for short-term political gain or other myopic reasons to enact such protectionist trade measures. So that's what was going on prior to the adoption of the Constitution. And really, when you look at the enumerated powers of Congress, the most important power is called it's contained in something called the Commerce Clause, which says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. This is typically cited as the justification for most legislation enacted by the United States Congress. Now, if you look carefully at the words, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states, that would seem to be, trade, and not that much, other things that probably directly impact trade, but commerce is a pretty narrow term, and unfortunately the Supreme Court has vastly expanded the powers, or the meaning of that word over the years. And finally, within the last 10 or 15 years, there were a couple cases that did put a limit on what the Congress could feasibly do under the Commerce Clause. One of them was prohibiting the possession of firearms within a school. Well, and they did try and justify that under the Commerce Clause. Well, these kids are going to grow up and become productive workers and eventually contribute something to the commerce. And, so you can see how convoluted the reasoning is that they use this Commerce Clause to justify their things. However, but you should just be aware that that's what's going on with the Commerce Clause. Now, a lot of people will look to the language in Article 1, Section 8. It's in the first clause, which states that Congress will have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That clause as a whole is called the Taxing and Spending Clause, and the particular aspect of it is the general welfare. It's called the General Welfare Clause. People look to it and say, well, Congress shall have the power, and then they put dots, ... to provide for the common defense and general welfare. Well, okay, that's a misreading of the language in there, and the Supreme Court has confirmed that that's not correct. What the General Welfare Clause under Article 1, Section 8 is prohibition against collecting taxes that are not going to be used for the general welfare. In other words, you can't And of course, this is not strictly followed either, because people pay taxes, which is redistributed to either corporations or individuals who, for whatever reason, are determined that they should have the person who's being taxed money. But again, they're not following it to a T. But the idea is general welfare. You got to spend it on something like a road where everyone can enjoy it, or the military, which is for everyone. Blah blah blah. And the power under the Commerce Clause, and actually all the other clauses in Article 1, Section 8, is expanded somewhat by a clause called the Necessary and Proper Clause, which says that Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into the execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution. So that says that they can pass laws that are necessary to achieve the results that they can legitimately legislate and attempt to achieve under the other clauses of the Article 1, Section 8. So, for instance, it's undisputed that Congress can raise taxes and spend the money on roads, which is, but they could maybe have to pass a law, well, they can regulate some activity involved in either the creation of the roads or the regulation of the roads. You can have a national speed limit, for instance. That's arguably necessary and proper to manage a transportation system. So that clause actually does expand the power under the other powers, or the power, granted under the other terms of the Article 1, Section 8. But a lot of people, a lot of legislators try to overstep the bounds on that too. And then another important thing to take note of is the 10th Amendment definitely has a major impact, or it should. It theoretically has a major impact, and did have a major impact when the government was following the Constitution, which says that the power is not delegated, this is the 10th Amendment, the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That means anything that isn't listed in Article 1, Section 8, the Congress has no power to do that, to enact any legislation whatsoever. And again, this is reading the Constitution as it was intended to be, not how it's unfortunately being used now. But, so that leaves a lot of power for the states, and a good example of that is police power. Well, that's what all the powers are called legally. It's police powers, but you can deal with actual law enforcement or, divorce laws, the police power, various things like that. So for instance, the federal government has no constitutional authority to go to your hometown and enact a police force, because Article 10th Amendment prohibits that. Now, of course, the 10th Amendment has actually been completely obliterated in practice. It has no application in our world as it exists currently, but those of us who want to see a return to an adherence to the Constitution would definitely like to see the 10th Amendment be reinstated. Okay, so that's a general overview of the powers of Congress. Excuse me. So you can see the theory behind it was that Congress is going to be enacting laws in a very limited area of life. We're talking about, not even intrastate, that is, trade, interstate trade, trade taking place only within a state. Like, say you live in Texas, for instance, and you live in Houston and you want to sell something to Dallas, a guy in Dallas. The federal government should have no authority to regulate that trade whatsoever, because it's wholly intrastate, and the Commerce Clause only says that it has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states, not within each several state. So I'll keep that in mind. You can see, if you understand Article 1, Section 8, how grossly overbounds the federal government is acting currently, compared to what they were supposed to be doing and how the government was designed. So, some people think, well, in the modern world, you need the government to do everything, and that's, of course, what the public education school systems will teach you from the day you set foot in there, is, yeah, the government's definitely needed in all areas, but those of us who think that the founding generation and the people who put a lot of debate and deliberation into the formation of the Constitution of the United States had it right, we're kind of disappointed with how things are going. So that's pretty much going to wrap up what I'm going to say right now about the powers of Congress under the United States Constitution. But I'm sure we will get back to that issue on many more videos to come. Alright, thanks.